All right. I'll give it just a minute and see if anyone pops in. I'm going to put final touches on this Johnny Depp portrait, and then I'll start a fresh one. So again, you can see the full process of how rough they start and where they end up. And then I would say probably 20-30 more minutes to do final details and a little bit more depth on this one. And then I'll start the next one. I'm still thinking of who I'm going to draw next, so maybe if anyone is talkative tonight, I'll work that out in the chat. All right. I talked about this for a while last night, but since I have diffused lights on, these are Lume Cube studio lights. Even with the diffusion and the barn doors on them, I'm still getting a pretty heavy graphite glare. So some of this, there's actually more detail in there than what you can see, which maybe in the future I'll just adjust to drawing at a slight angle so it's lifted off the desk a little bit and won't catch so much glare from the lights. Really, with his hair, it's such a mess, and just sort of, it looks like intentionally chaotic. I'm just going to add a little bit more shape that is similar to the reference. And like I was saying yesterday, it's a relatively non-standard photo of him, which was intentional. I wanted to choose something that wasn't like a screen grab from a movie. And I talked about this a little bit yesterday and the day before. There's different types of shading that I do in hair for these types of drawings. A lot of what I'm doing right now, a little bit of a page couch, is clusters of hair that are mimicking what he has in the reference photo. I try not to do broad shading in hair as often as I can avoid it, because you do get a little bit of a glare. So even if somebody's wanting to frame and mat these, the goal is that it reads the right way in any kind of lighting. With some mediums, there's just no way around it, especially once you get a lot of graphite dust on the page. Quite a bit of a difference from energy yesterday. I talked about this a little bit, but the days that I don't run, I feel like I draw a little bit lazier, have less drive. But I've literally just finished running with enough time to get home, get cleaned up, and start drawing for the live stream. So I'm kind of waiting for that second wind to hit, but I already feel more alert tonight drawing. Hi, how's it going? Thank you. I was just talking about how with the lighting that I use on my desk setup, there's a pretty bad glare on some of the darker areas, so hopefully it's not showing up too roughly in the live stream. Right now I'm just kind of pulling his hairline down just a touch. For so long I've tried to not have these little J hooks on sharp lines, but here his hair is actually curled like that, so it's kind of a counterintuitive movement. Drawn a lot of messy hair this week, so I'm trying to think of who to draw for the next one that either has maybe an easier hairstyle to do, or not easier, but a little bit cleaner. I've got a whole gallery full of reference portraits, but if anyone's watching and wants to suggest people, no offense if I don't pick anything people suggest. I've talked about this quite a bit, but if it's someone I'm not like thinking of from a film or have like some sort of attachment to or interest, it's a little hard to want to do several days of drawing on it, unless it's for a commission. Who am I drawing? This is Johnny Depp from the Minamata behind the scenes. So I think it's like one of the rare photos where he doesn't have 2 hats and 90 pieces of jewelry or a costume and prosthetics on. I was saying a little while ago, it's I think like a lesser known photo of him taken by Greg Williams. I wanted to choose sort of a non-standard one instead of something that's from a screen grab from a movie. Also thinking of someone I might redraw at this size, since I have a lot of smaller portraits that I really enjoyed doing. I'm still working on some playlists to list in the description of these videos so you can listen along on your own if you want to watch, and as well as listen to what I'm hearing in my headphones. Obviously I can't play it or the stream will get pulled down, but that's so far the most appealing idea I've had, rather than making music of my own to play in the background. That's something that would be a little more time consuming, but maybe in the long run might provide a little bit more of a peaceful experience. I pretty much bring it up in all of these, but just in case anyone's new, I don't really do these as ASMR videos traditionally because there's so much noise where we live. So even if it were the intention to draw and just have drawing noise, you'd mostly hear my neighbors doing dishes and being loud in the shared alleyway. It's with the dense city living. Speaking of, it's hot in San Francisco today for for San Francisco. I've actually got the window open and there's not even a breeze. I almost want to lift some of this right here to give it less of a Karen haircut. What pencils do I use? These are Blackwings. It's a Blackwing 71 that I've been using for this whole series I'm on. These are the Frank Lloyd Wright series of Blackwings, so they have some color and design that's kind of reminiscent of his style. They have like a traditional sort of square eraser that you can cut or shape, you know, and then they come with refills as well. But this is a medium graphite, so it's good for a softer drawing. No, this isn't Michael Jackson. I'm not sure where that came from. Let's see, it says you're trying to get better at drawing, so that's why I asked. I don't know if it's like a professional or something. Oh, the pencils? Is that what you mean? Got sidetracked there. I am going to lift some of this. Yeah, these just more on like the Blackwings in general. They have a few different runs of these different pencils. This is a signature series, and really the only difference is just the design of it. It is a nice graphite. It's if I'm not mistaken, I think it's Japanese graphite. Not that it really matters. I mean, a pencil can be just a pencil if that's what you want it to be, but for the type of texture and depth that I add into this style of portrait, I prefer these medium graphites. But they also have like a natural and a black series, and those are a deeper, darker, and a little bit more or less forgiving in terms of sketching. With these, it's just the right blend for me to be able to have a hard pressure and get a nice dark line, and also still be able to do light texture. Really, for like any of this stuff, if I'm traveling, which I do a good amount of, I'd take these instead of Blackwings, which you might want to check out. These are Pentel Graph Gear 1000s, and they come in a bunch of different sizes. But they won't break in a bag. And on my smaller ones, I'll show you real quick. So like the smaller portraits that I've done, here's a good example. This one was done mostly with this 0.3 Graph Gear. So it's time consuming. You know, they have different sizes. Like I have another one that's a 0.9 over here. And it feels a little bit more like your standard pencil. But really, I think it's more about time spent than the tools. And then, honestly, all the Blackwing pencils were gifted to me. And so I've been really happy to use them in that sense, but I don't know that I would recommend spending the extra amount on them. I'm not sure that they're really worth that unless you want to collect the different series that they do, because they've had everything from like Frank Lloyd Wright series to like Bruce Lee. They've had astronaut, like NASA series. Somebody was in the chat yesterday talking about how they have the Joe DiMaggio series and it just has Yankees pinstripes on it. Oh, thank you. So So right now I'm just going to lift some of these. I feel like even though it's photo accurate, he's got like a little bit of a Karen haircut, so I'm going to pull some of these strands out and reblend his forehead. Usually don't do this, but it's just every time I look at it, I can't unsee that which I have emulated or copied from the reference photo. Still got this odd line here. But yeah, if you're still wanting to know stuff about drawing, I'd say it's really about more about the time spent, and then you just get partial to certain things. One thing I don't like about the Blackwings, I have a fairly big hand, and once they get past a certain point, like with the Blackwing specific sharpener, I have a two-step sharpener. And what that does is it shaves away the wood, so you get the traditional Blackwing long point, but then your pencil gets shorter pretty rapidly to keep it like that. And since these are the softer graphite, they break a little easier. So in like a standard $4 metal pencil sharpener, they kind of shatter too much. So you need like a sharper blade, I'd say, to keep these nice and fine. But I think like a good starting point is a Graph Gear 1000 in any size, maybe a 0.5 since it's more standard. They won't break in a bag. You don't have to sharpen them, you know. So there's some benefits to that. Yeah, I was talking about this the other day. I think like when people focus too much on what tools to use, they kind of it sort of slows you down in the process in general. And I'm certainly guilty of it. I used to work in a store where we sold somewhat high-end pens and pencils and all this different paper and journals and stuff like that. And I don't think a week ever passed where I didn't buy a few things. And it got to the point where my pencil bag was like too full to carry everything I was using at the time per project. And when I quit that job, I stopped buying things. And so I just kind of worked with what I had or what people gave me. And my drawing has exponentially leveled up. And I think it's because I'm not switching, because at one point I was drawing with fountain pen exclusively, and then micron and watercolor, and then from there I started drawing only ballpoint pen portraits for about a year, and those are less forgiving, so there's a higher error of, or a higher rate of error of like failure. And I think it was good ultimately, but when I just started drawing with graphite again, I feel like it kind of leveled up a little bit faster because it's kind of just basic drawing, not any special tools required. But something else I do when we if I'm traveling for any work or if we go on a trip or anything, I take pens and pencils from hotels. I have a little collection of those, and I'll do like drawings just with those because it's usually like a $2 Bic click pen or like a hotel pencil. Usually you'll get a hotel pencil if it's a sort of like more boutique place. I feel like they kind of phased out the hotel pen a while ago, but occasionally we get them. But that's more about like, I don't know, it's sort of having different styles that I draw in. I feel inspired when I'm on a trip and I find hotel pen or pencil, it'll inspire a different type of drawing or something, but usually it's not expensive stuff. Like, I'll show you real quick since I'm just about done with this. I'm honestly a little bored with Johnny Depp's face. Let me grab a couple of them. Oops. This is just kind of speaking to like people asking about stuff in general, like drawing tools. It says you're gonna hop off. Oh, right on, thanks. Yeah, I'm just gonna keep talking about this. I tend to ramble during these. This is from a really awful tour that I was on, and I ended up getting a hotel solo without the group that I was working with, just to get a little peace of mind, and this was the pencil in there. So I've done very few because I don't want to grind too far past the name. But you know, it's just like a dollar bin type pencil that was on the table in the hotel, and I've done a bunch of drawings with that. This is from taking our kid to like her first concert at the hotel that we stayed in. You know, just like a blue ballpoint, so I've done a bunch of stuff with that. Typically, I'll draw mostly with those pens or pencils when I get them. This is from, let's see if there's actually a name on it. I guess there's only a logo, but this is Hotel Gran Tremezzo. So it was kind of like a place that I've seen a lot and my wife was obsessed with. And they just had these hotel pins. But yeah, all that to say, it's not about what you draw with, it's what you're drawing, you know? And it doesn't have to be expensive or fancy, it can just be whatever's around. Okay, back to the care and repair. I think there's just no way around it. That's his hair in this photo, so we'll just pull these back in. Yeah, that's one of my favorite things to do. Like last year I did an artist retreat in Louisiana and stayed at a friend's farm. And anytime we would go out to get food, I would take a paper takeaway bag and draw on those. And then when I left, I gave her a portrait of J.J. Cale on like a torn brown paper bag from one of the local Cajun restaurants. I feel like, I don't know, there's something about drawing stuff like that. Sort of reminds me of when Johnny Cash hadn't met Bob Dylan yet and he was really enamored with him. It's in Walk the Line, but it is actually a true story. He wrote a letter to him on the back of a air sickness bag because he was just using what was around. It never occurred to him. But, you know, stuff like that. I like to pick up little things, or if there's like an art store that I go to on the road or anything like that, and I get a little paper bag, I'll draw on that bag. I used to tape those in my journal, but then I started drawing on both sides. And so eventually I'll maybe make something out of that, put together a book of like all the years of traveling and drawing random things. There's lots of doodles. It wasn't really like traditional drawing, so it was sort of what I had time to do between drives and shows. One I remember in particular was in Ohio, and it's when we learned kind of a universal truth, at least in the US. We had played our show and we were getting back to the hotel, and we had to basically sleep for 6-7 hours and then had to take off to meet up on the tour with the headlining band in their next city. They had a bus, so they could just party in the bus and ride along, and we had to either drive overnight or get up and do early drives. But we stayed in, I think it was a $75 hotel room with 2 beds, and it was extended stay is what's on the sign, which the universal truth I have learned about extended stay hotels, I have never stayed in one that didn't smell like 10 different types of dinner in one room, and they all smell like ashtrays, even now. And I remember the drawing I did that night when we got back from the show was a fish, because it smelled like, I don't know, fish fingers, kind of like microwave fish food, and cigarettes, and it was a fish smoking a cigarette in a Comfort Inn extended stay. And it's like little doodles like that, stuff that would make the guys in the band laugh, or I'd send home to, have like memories of it later. But a lot of that, it's on hotel paper. things like that. There's also several, maybe before I start the next portrait in a little bit, I'll show you some. If I can get a hotel pad or branded paper from the hotel, I always ask for it. I like to draw a little series. Maybe it's inspired by the movies that I watch in the hotel, or, you know, whatever concert or thing that we're going to. Or if it's, more specifically when I was touring for a living and I would travel with bands, those were usually a form of venting. So it was kind of like a visual journal, kind of poking at some band members or the frustrations of sharing like tight quarters for extended periods of time, which I've thought about putting together a whole book of those stories and draw a little bit for each one, because if I didn't draw it, then I still have everything written down. So I tend to journal a lot, especially when I travel. And had a lot of stories from those days. So that might be interesting. Could also be interesting, even how I've shown a few times in the last few days that some of these drawings I've done before, but smaller. Maybe I should revisit some of the old doodles and draw them with updated skills. But I don't even know if anyone reads books anymore. I feel like it's reminds me of Ghostbusters when Janine asks Egon if he reads a lot, and he says print is dead. It's a deep cut reference, so I imagine not many people will get it, but you know, I feel like everyone's kind of selling something now, so it makes me think of the thing that I've said several times, is that everyone has a book in them, and most of the times it's where it should stay. Which I didn't coin that, but it's been attributed to a lot of different writers. But I also have piles of photo negatives and, you know, hard drives of photos and video from tours, so there's all kinds of stuff that I could do with that. Makes me think a little bit about Mike Judge's Tales from the Tour Bus. If you haven't seen that show, it's not really my style of animation, but it's great stories because it's behind the scenes with James Brown and Johnny Paycheck and a bunch of really great characters over the years. And it's all their band members or them telling stories, and then it's fully animated. But I'm talking about something that'll be a little bit more less of a cartoon and more of like a book of short stories and illustrations. So this part, sadly, you're kind of at a disadvantage watching right here because there's so much glare from the lighting. And so it gets really reflective and you lose a lot of the detail in there. But when I finish this, as well as all the other ones from this week, I'll take photos without glare and post those in my shorts, or it'll be on my website and Instagram. And then I think this is day 22. I counted earlier. Officially day 22 in a row of drawing at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Which I explain it in most of them, but I feel like it's worth reiterating. Mainly just doing this to give myself a little bit of accountability with a single style series of art. And so I've been doing these sort of floating head graphite portraits. Most of them so far have been based on Greg Williams or Brian Bone Smith photos, two Leica photographers that I've followed for a really long time. And they both have kind of like a casual, like almost like a conversational style of photography. So it feels a little bit more like you're in the moment with them instead of a posed shot. and I'm happy to answer questions if people have technical questions, or really most questions about anything. If you have suggestions on who to draw next, I'm open to them, but I have a gallery of portraits already picked out, so no offense if I don't go with what you suggest. But a lot of the time when I choose these portraits, it's based on a few factors. I require a pretty high-res photo, and for that reason, as well as being a fan, there's a few Leica photographers that I like a lot. And they both just happen to work with mostly actors and musicians. It's also, I think, easier to relate with people in terms of having like a recognizable face to draw. But I will, before this next bit of travel that I'm about to do, I'm gonna have to draw some portraits of a few people that I met last time that I promised portraits when I came back. And so I probably will do those, which you won't recognize them, but you'll get to see me do a smaller, faster version of what I'm doing now for someone who's just an old average person. I'm closer to like the commissions that I do. Anyway, I feel like there's nothing more boring than making art and talking about art, so I'm gonna rabbit trail and talk about something else. Move some of this stuff so it's not rattling around on the desk. The guy saying something about Michael Jackson makes me think of Steve Wozniak, which if you're not familiar with him, he's one of the actual creators and engineers and technicians that worked on the original Apple Lisa computers and models before that, Apple II. He has like a legitimate condition where he has face blindness and he can't decipher people's faces. It's kind of like being tone deaf, but specifically with people's faces. He was played by Seth Rogen in that movie, but he's actually quite a bit different than him. It's an entertaining movie, but I've listened to a lot of interviews with that guy, and he's a little bit more eccentric than he was played. But even though he's probably just being a tool, in all fairness, I'm pretty sure he did base Willy Wonka on Michael Jackson, so there you go, full circle. I'll say something else about the art, and then I'll talk about something else. I am going to be more talkative today because I ran. I have more energy for it. With these types of drawings, sometimes when you're first starting these, it's hard to know when to stop because you can overwork areas, which is a pretty fine line between that, especially with a heavily contrasted drawing. Like the last one I did of Josh Brolin, his one whole side of his face is so contrasted that I actually didn't even go that dark on the drawing. But at a certain point, I feel like it's good to just stop working on it if you feel like there's nothing that totally stands out as needing to be perfect. And then, like I mentioned before, the other ones, because I've been streaming every day at 5, these are all for sale if people want them. If there's any Depp heads. Or I've also drawn for this series Tom Hardy, Joaquin Phoenix, and Josh Brolin so far. And then eventually I'll have prints of these available on my website. But really a lot of this is just trying to stay accountable to one style of drawing, so I'm not so ADHD about learning new techniques, especially if I don't have any students or anyone asking me to learn something specifically. And then this portfolio that I'm drawing in, it's actually a gift from the owner of Paper Republic, which is who makes the journals and sketchbooks that I draw with, both large and small ones. He and one of the, I think the head of their marketing company came over when they're based in Vienna, and they came over to the States when I was still working at the company that I mentioned earlier. And they liked my small drawings and kept saying that, something kind of whispering to each other. And then they mentioned that I probably am overdue for a large portfolio. And when they returned home from that trip, they sent me this full-size leather portfolio with my favorite drawing books already loaded up in the refill slot. So just kind of making good on something that they wanted to see my art, but larger. And I've kind of dabbled with it. I've filled pages with multiple small portraits. I've done some large scenes, but ultimately I always gravitate back towards portraits. And so this is kind of me just trying to really commit to that. And then 2 weeks from today, the drawing time will change, but I will still try to go live every single day. I've got some travel stuff coming up, and then after that, I might either be back on at 5, or if there's a time that works better for people, I'll do that. But every day is the goal. Anyway, I feel like that was all the administration. I feel like the music I'm listening to kind of took a shift, took a turn. I gotta find something else. Okay, I think I'm done with messing with hair. I'll get his eyes right, and then we'll move on to the next portrait. I mentioned this the last couple days while I've been drawing his face, but he has kind of a severe lack of eyebrows in this photo. I wonder if that's from prosthetic removal, or if he shaved them down, or if that's just what his eyebrows look like. Something about drawing eyes, especially in this style. I'm actually not going quite as contrasted as they are in this photo. But the white of the eye, the so-called white of the eye, is very rarely ever white. It's usually gray, and there's a pretty heavy drop shadow from the upper lid most of the time. It's a little thing that you can do. Also, eyelids typically, especially like this, he doesn't seem to have any eyelashes either. Maybe it's just because he's played so many roles with facial prosthetics and makeup. But there's always a bit of a downturn on the upper eyelid like this, where it gives you a little bit of a rounded drop shadow. This is unrelated to drawing, but I just thought about this today when I was running. I don't really like to run outside, especially because we live in San Francisco. So I'm not trying to get hit by a car while somebody's texting and driving, but and all the hills. But on the treadmill earlier, when I stepped on, I realized somebody had spit their gum out on the treadmill in the gym, like in a nice gym. It makes me wonder. So maybe I'm just like, I'm turning slowly into the Larry David of my area, but it's the same kind of thing as when people get off treadmills and they don't have the courtesy to wipe them down. It's kind of like an odd thing to me. I don't understand people at this point. I'm starting to see a little bit more of that. The more I travel as well, especially post-pandemic, I've noticed a pretty hefty lack of like social decorum. I think people are a little too removed maybe or something, but I can't imagine a scenario where I would do that and then leave gum on a treadmill. You know, it's not like somebody didn't notice their gum came out. And that's even less related to drawing than what I usually talk about, but I don't know. I hope it's not like a sign of the times. I feel like the more I'm around people, and maybe it's because we live in like tech bro hell. There's like a lot of like tech vests and people talking about hedge funds everywhere in this city. No offense if they're watching, I can't imagine they would be, but I think that probably has something to do with it. A lot of people are sort of socially, I don't know what the word would be, not even awkward, like socially oblivious. It's kind of an interesting thing about living in San Francisco. If you just walk around in a somewhat busy area, you can just hear everybody dating on apps. You can hear the meetups if you walk through, like, you know, because there's a lot of businesses on the sidewalks here. So if you walk down, like, you know, Polk Street, you can hear all the, if you walk at the right time. It used to happen to me when I'd leave work. I feel like it's a city of people living mostly on screens, which is funny because we have such iconic scenery. But I feel like it's weird. Same thing as what I mentioned the other day, that in a gym that doesn't allow kids, they also play cartoons on the movie screen all the time. Like kids' cartoons for people to work out to. Which is, it's weird to me. Like I'm starting to feel like heavy vibes of the get off my lawn energy and coursing through my veins. I know I said I was done with this hair, but I'm gonna just do a little bit more. That's funny, I talked about that and lost a few watchers, which is fine. I enjoyed drawing a little bit more when I'm able to ramble. But yeah, I look around and I wonder if I'm like turning into that guy. Like the middle-aged guy in a bad Clint Eastwood movie. Get off my lawn, you know? Well, I don't know, maybe it's like we just grew up in a city of people that were raised by nannies and staff, so they're not used to having to clean up after themselves. But who leaves gum on a treadmill? What an animal. I saw a thing, I think it's because I was talking about this on the live stream and my phone obviously is listening and just generated in my algorithm, but apparently one of the lawyers that was documenting the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial, I just thought of this because I'm drawing Johnny Depp. I don't know if anyone else followed along on that, but I feel like it sort of took over the internet for a couple weeks, a few years back. We certainly watched all of it, but one of the lawyers that was breaking down the trial day by day got like into a YouTuber fiasco, which is kind of funny to me. That somebody gains popularity from doing legal breakdowns and then all of a sudden couldn't keep up with the fame that they had generated by doing that. I guess if you want to call it that, fame, notoriety. Just thought it's funny that something was spawned by that Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial like that. Maybe they'll do a movie about that and Johnny Depp will play him. Or they could do like a Eddie Murphy style thing and Johnny Depp could play everybody. They should make a movie documenting all the weird stuff that Johnny Depp's been into. The whole thing of him playing guitar with Jeff Beck and all those guys was so weird to me. I know that his whole early story is that he played guitar in bands, but I don't think that he ever played guitar well. So I've never seen him play more than like 5 chords, and even then it was pretty sloppy. And not in like a Keith kind of sloppy. Like someone who was having a hard time holding chords and standing up. Which, I don't know, I see that kind of stuff. Like another one is Jason Momoa. He has a band now. But I've, sad to admit this, I have watched some of the videos of their live shows, and they just do kind of like half covers of popular portions of songs, but like kind of basic songs. And he plays bass, but I think should be in parentheses next to that, holds bass. But I don't know, maybe if I was in their shoes, like being insanely well known for something vastly different than what they're doing for fun, but they have to do it in front of everyone because of who they are. Sorry, hold for plane. It's the seaplane that goes out over the bay. I don't know, I can't say I wouldn't do the same thing. Sort of like Jason Momoa having a collection of Leica photos, but I've never seen his actual photography. I've only ever seen him with, you know, $250K worth of camera equipment. But I guess what you get known for isn't always what you do all the time, so I guess there's some of that. I'm trying to think what that would be for me, given that I'd be in that same situation. I think being like someone that played music for a living for so long, it's hard to imagine going and being in like a crappy cover band and like feeling cool at that level. But maybe it's just more about like all the other stuff they do, like it's about the experience. There is like an overwhelming amount of actors that are also musicians, like some that are pretty unexpected. Like, does anyone know that Kevin Costner has a band? Not really sad to admit, it was pretty interesting. I watched some of their sound check videos that they posted, and I'm not sure that he's sure or not whether it's him singing on the microphone. He looked really confused, and I couldn't tell of the 5 or 6 backup singers that were also singing with him, and probably a decent amount of tracks that are being played, what his actual voice sounded like. But he does shows, like country shows. And then one of his co-stars, I don't think he's that bad. It's the guy that plays his son on Yellowstone. He is actually a somewhat decent, like root style country, but sort of in a modern way. I wouldn't say I'd listen to a lot of it. There's one of his songs that I have on a playlist. But, you know, like Bruce Willis had a band, and I'm pretty sure he played a lot of harmonica, which, no thank you. It's one of those instruments that I've very little appreciation for unless I'm around a campfire or on a chain gang. Not that I've done the latter, but harmonicas I feel like have a place, and it is not in the hands of an actor. Russell Crowe, another one, he's got a band. Which there's a video on his Instagram that is worth watching. And I still am not convinced that it is another guy. It looks like him and like someone who I think is well known wherever he's from. but it's like two heavier set Russell Crowe types singing with a lot of auto-tune. There should be like a reality show about that, when famous people's hobbies take over their personality. I'm trying to think of the other ones. I think the worst of the worst is Jared Leto and his band, 30 Seconds to Mars or whatever. That guy, I've always had a hard time watching him. I can honestly say my favorite scene that he's ever been in is in Fight Club, when he gets pummeled by Edward Norton. Not for any reason, that is one of his best scenes, but his band is possibly one of the worst bands, just in general. Not even because there's an actor, like a well-known actor in the band. Then there's cool ones. Jason Schwartzman was the drummer of Phantom Planet. And if you don't know them, they played the, I think it was the OC theme song, California. And he was actually a great drummer and cool. And then he went on to form his own thing called Coconut Records, where it's like a lot of great music, for especially for someone who's written and acted in so many things. And then I think one that I can't not mention, Billy Bob Thornton is the drummer of the Boxmasters, which I have a story about that. So Billy Bob Thornton, the very famous actor, is the drummer of his own sort of old school, like outlaw country band. And this story, so it happened to a friend's band, of like a friend of mine's band, and I couldn't believe it. And then 2 years later, it happened to us as well. So I guess it was just a thing. But we had pre-sold tickets for, this is old school, so like iPhones didn't even exist yet. Everyone had flip phones. We had pre-sold tickets opening for that band. And at the time, his guitar player, or well, he alternated guitar and bass, was Unknown Henson, who was the voice of Squidbillies. So he had kind of like a, he's alone a legendary guitar player, but we pre-sold, I think, 150 odd tickets, and it wasn't a huge venue. It was a pretty small cap. It was like a 500 to 750 cap. I can't really remember. It was in Abilene, Texas. And we had promoted the show, and we had done like radio spots, and you know, had not played our hometown for a month leading up to it, so there wouldn't be any draw away from the concert. And then we got to the day and we sound checked, and Billy Bob Thornton walked in for their sound check, and he looked at the stage and he saw all of our gear, and he said, hopefully there's no kids in the podcast or in the video. He said, what's all this shit? And pointed at our equipment, and then said, get it off the stage. And then we didn't get to play. So we pre-sold tickets for him, and then promoted the show, and then never got to even play. And they let us keep our merch booth set up in the back, but nobody knew who we were because no band opened for them. And he had done that the year before to a friend of mine who was in another band in that same town. So I don't know, Billy Bob Thornton is one of those guys that he is the least talented guy musically in his own band. So it's odd that he would choose to kind of act like that repeatedly to smaller bands. But another actor slash musician. Well, I guess I said a cuss word and people left. It's all right. It's me talking. I also accidentally called this a podcast, so it's not. It's very much not. Live stream. But yeah, there's something about actors and bands that just It's a hard one to swallow for me. Um, Another good example of like a good one would be akin to the Jason Schwartzman reference would be Lewis Pullman, who was just in Thunderbolts. He played Century or whatever his name is. It's Bill Pullman's son, but he was the drummer in Josh Brolin's daughter's band, and he's actually a pretty good drummer. She also acts as well, and she sings and writes well. So there's some exceptions to it. Pretty sure Patrick Swayze had a band, if I remember correctly. His nephew definitely did. We actually played a show with his nephew one time. The buzz about that venue was he's Patrick Swayze's nephew. Everyone kept saying it. It's kind of funny. I'm trying to think of other examples of actors that have bands that are good or bad. I would say so far, most are not good. I think there's also the reverse of it too. Guys who are really talented musicians who are not great actors. A good example would be Jason Isbell. He's a great guitar player, good songwriter, but maybe one of the worst actors in that last Scorsese film. Yeah, I can't really think of any more. Actually, a relevant one because I'm listening to him right now. Tom Petty acted a little bit. He was in The Postman or whatever that awful Kevin Costner movie was. He played like a rogue cowboy guy, and he cannot act. Could not act. But he's Tom Petty, you know. Similar to like athletes not being able to act. I think it's okay to be just good at something and not do everything else. I guess there's some British examples. Paddy Considine, one of the best actors to have ever lived. Also not a great band. But he looks like he's having fun. What's his name? Damien. He's in Billions. He's in Band of Brothers. Can't remember the actor's name. He was married to the late, great Helen McCrory. He has the record. He is a musician as well. And then there's also, now that I'm thinking about it, there's a lot of like UK examples. Billy Boyd, love him as an actor in A Hobbit and everything. Supposedly very sweet. I actually have a cameo that I got for my birthday from him. But his band Beefcake, I've heard a couple songs and they're not bad, but it's very much an actor's band. No offense to any Beefcake fans, or to him, you know. I feel like he's got that real quality of actor before musician, even though he's still really talented. Then there's another one I've actually got him on the playlist, Joe, DJO. That's Joe Curie, who's in Stranger Things and trying to think, he's in quite a few things, but I actually would say his music is on par, if not better, than his acting. So he's another rare exception, and I think American, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe he's Canadian. I guess Drake used to act. He was on Degrassi, but I've never watched it or listened to him, so I can't really make a ruling one way or the other. I know Jeff Bridges has a band, but I've only ever heard the soundtrack of Crazy Heart, and he's great in that, but I do have a sneaking suspicion that T-Bone Burnett used a lot of comps to get his voice to sound right for those songs. And then speaking of that, there's what's his name? Plays Walker in Yellowstone. He's a musician turned actor. I'm blanking on his name, but he was also in Crazy Heart, which tracks with yesterday what I was talking about, mentioning Scott Cooper movies. That's another great one. But any movie that has T-Bone Burnett as the music director, it's going to be a pretty good movie. I can't remember his name. It's going to bother me. I think it's Ryan something. Which so far he was good in that movie. He was, not that I loved Yellowstone. It is very much like the soap opera for the Western fella. But I think once I heard Quentin Tarantino break it down about how Yellowstone is a great soap opera, I can't unhear that. So now that show kind of falls into that category for me. Get a little bit of an edge on this pencil. Oh, it's going to bother me that I can't remember that guy's name. Anyway, I'll just keep on that train of thought. Speaking of Yellowstone, I feel like, and I was talking about Billy Bob Thornton earlier. I feel like the creator of that show had like somebody, he must have like dirt on somebody, because so many of his shows don't feel like great writing, but he gets praised for really good writing, which is kind of an anomaly. It's a mystery to me. He was great in terms of the film Hell or High Water was a great film. It had its moments that I could have done without, but that was for the most part well written. I think a lot of it was the casting. It's hard to go wrong with all those guys. But I think 1923 is possibly one of the worst shows I've ever seen. Like, it had its moments that, I mean, it is very much like a tough guy soap opera. But I didn't really understand the praise for that show. It's just kind of a mystery to me, and there's literally no payoff in any of his TV scripts. Like, Yellowstone was completely botched in the end, and then just kind of felt like they gave up. I don't know, it's weird. Maybe it's him fighting with the production or something, but I don't know. He's got a few decent things, but there's always like heavy-handed, cheesy drama in his stuff. I don't really get the praise. I also thought it was an odd story. Sam Elliott was telling a story about when they were making 1883, another Taylor Sheridan thing, where the one request he had for the costumes department was to make sure that his hat fit. And they rushed his dressing as one of the main characters. That makes no sense to me, and his hat didn't fit. And he said if you look at most of the footage of him, he's holding his hat on his head. Just like things like that. How do you not give one of the main guys a hat that fits? Just seems kind of like that sort of sums up what his shows mostly are, is like really thrown together and then praised as like this genius work. And surprise, he plays a cool guy in everything he writes. It's almost like makes Quentin Tarantino being in his own films as a doofus more appealing, because he doesn't write like the cool guy for himself. I mean, he certainly has before, but not like in a Taylor Sheridan way. Which I find it odd, like I saw this thing about people on Yellowstone while in production were suing each other. And it turns out Cole Hauser, one of the main characters, was suing the show creator, or the other way around, because his coffee company, unrelated to the show, the logo looked like Taylor Sheridan's ranch brand. Looked like. It was 2 letters. It just kind of makes me not like the guy even more. I don't know, I think like once I know that kind of stuff about people, it's hard to watch productions that they're a part of. Same thing happened with Kurt Sutter. I feel like Sons of Anarchy had some pockets. And honestly, like I've personally benefited from that because the band I was in had a couple placements on it, so I've watched it because of that. I wanted to know every bit of it. But my main memory of Kurt Sutter, the show creator on that, is of him trashing the actor Mandy Patinkin because he didn't want to be in something that was like a little bit too gruesome for what he signed up for. And Kurt Sutter like took out an article himself and trashed this guy that he didn't even work with. It just made me think, like, if you have time to do that, maybe spend more time on writing your own show. Because So that's another show that, like, it feels like they got tired and just ended it. It looks like everyone got bored and left. That's fine. Brace yourself for rambling. Or mute me if you don't want to hear it. Lift these lines a little bit. Go back and blend this little spot. Just about done with this one, and then I'm going to start a portrait from scratch. Earlier I was talking about actors that are also musicians and vice versa. One that just occurred to me is Loudon Wainwright III. I'm pretty sure he was a musician first, but he's acted in quite a few things. If you're familiar with it, which is also relevant to him because it's a Tim Burton reference, but Big Fish, one of the few movies he wasn't in with Tim Burton, Loudon Wainwright played the mayor of the little perfect town that he visits too early. So that's another positive actor-musician balance. I guess there's some that might count, even though they're not heavily featured. And Almost Famous, the bass player, is, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but his band is called Sun Kill Moon. It's some great stuff. But he's acting as a musician in that film, so I don't know if that truly counts. It's really just having like somebody who can play live and also do a bit of acting. But I think he only has about 4 lines in that film. I guess there's, now that I'm thinking about it, I actually know some people that are good actors and musicians, but not known for their music necessarily, so it's not quite the same. This whole thing started because I was talking about Johnny Depp playing guitar poorly with really, really famous guitar players on stage. I wonder if that's kind of like those guitar players are excited because of the eyes that an actor at this level would bring to them, or if it's the same as like being excited to meet like a famous actor in general or athlete or something, because it didn't make sense that he and Jeff Beck were on stage playing guitar next to one another. Sort of like the grown-ups, like School of Rock vibe. No offense to Johnny Depp, but I would say he's a much better actor than a guitar player. And I've actually played the venue he co-owns in LA, so I appreciate that he's super plugged in, but I don't know that I would call him a great guitar player. Okay, I'm getting down to it. I need to pick who I'm going to draw next. If anyone has suggestions, I'm happy to take a look, but I've got a pretty big portrait gallery to choose from, so. I've also offered several times to start drawing and have people guess who they are, which has only really worked once. So maybe I'll just pick somebody I want to draw and go from there. Well, it looks like I'm going to pick somebody then. All right, well, I mentioned before these, this series of portraits. Hopefully you can hear me. There's some dirt bike guys outside. These portraits are all for sale, either the original or prints of them. So if people are interested, I'm happy to sell these or have prints eventually on my website. But I'm going to go ahead and call this one of Johnny Depp done. And just leave it there because I don't want to get into territory of overworking something. But since we're here at the end, I'm going to sign it so you can see. I got to kind of move it into not the best centered shot, but so there he is. And just to kind of revisit the others from this last 21 days of drawing. So here's Josh Brolin. And that's based on a photo by Brian Bowen Smith, the Leica photographer that I've mentioned a few times. Here's Joaquin Phoenix. This is based on a photo by Greg Williams, another great photographer. And then here's the first one that I started on with this series. This is Tom Hardy, and that's based on a photo by Greg Williams as well. So mostly Leica photographers that I've used for all the references. All right. Well, if no one has any input, I'll just go ahead and look through this gallery. I would show you, but it's on my iPad and there's a pretty heavy glare under this light and I don't want to mess with the lighting, so just talk amongst yourselves for a little bit. Here's what I've been drawing with, this Blackwing. And what you'll see for this next little bit is just how rough the portraits start and where they all begin. Should I stick with the same kind of choices I've been making, or should I change it up a little bit? I would have chosen this earlier, but I've honestly been a little bit torn on a few different people to draw, so I'll just have to okay, I picked one. So I'm going to try to draw for as long as I can with these. I don't have any Blackwing pencil extenders, which I'm starting to get a sneaking suspicion I am going to just need to go and get those, which I don't love, but I also don't want to go through the box of pencils too fast. Alright, since most people bailed on watch, I'm going to take just a little quick water break and I'll start. Okay. This is one that I've drawn smaller before. I'm just going to start. If anyone wants to guess who it is after I get some progress done, you can, or I'm happy to just tell you. Either way, whatever makes you happy. Okay, so how all of these start, I try to get my reference centered on the page. Make sure that you're squared up here. And most of what I do, let me set up a little thing to block some of the glare here. Eventually I'll have printouts of all of my references, and then I might start streaming widescreen. I've been doing a portrait or something that is better suited for phones, because I think more people tend to watch these on their phones, but let me know if you'd rather see it in a full screen setting. But for now, since I've got a pretty hefty glare on my iPad, it's hard to see the reference photo. So. All right, and then this is a pretty slow, tedious process. So that's going to mark sort of the rough bottom of where his nose is. His head is at an angle, so he's tilting, so the center line is going to be more like this than a straight up portrait. So I'm going to mark kind of a rough area of where the eyes are going to intersect with that. I'd say his direction is about right there. And basically what I do is I just mark out certain rough guidelines of where everything is, and then I use that to build off of. So this is roughly where the bottom of the nose is. This is roughly where the eye area is going to be. This is from the highest corner of his mouth that is up here. And then I typically will mark where the hairline starts and the height of the hair. With these portraits, especially when I'm using pencil, I don't do any circle or anything like that because I find that can distort the face sometimes. I usually do that when I get started with a ballpoint, but typically when I'm drawing with ballpoints, I'm doing scribble method, and so it's a little bit messier. The other thing I recommend getting if you're trying to draw more photo accurate is a small ruler. This is just a little 6-inch automotive ruler. It's flat, so I can carry it in my sketchbooks and everything pretty easily. It's also a little flexible, but that helps gauge the width of the nose, the distance from the corners of the eyes, things like that. That'll help you get a little bit more photo accuracy. All right. So this process always starts really rough. Something I always say is it's better to fix a rough drawing than to obsess over getting it perfect. So the goal here is to just start identifying shapes in the nose. It's also, I think, why I've gravitated back towards drawing a little bit more with pencil, because I'm really not too obsessed over, I think there's like a big movement, and sorry, I'm fumbling my words. I'm trying to pay attention as well. There's kind of a big movement in permanence in drawing with something that's less forgiving, like ink. So there are some benefits to that if you like that style. I also really relies heavily on what type of ink, and I get tired of that and not being able to erase and adjust, because ultimately this is about enjoying the process rather than stressing over it. And I noticed with a lot of the ink drawings that I was doing, I would get 98% of it finished and have one little glob of oil or residue from the pen that I'm drawing with somewhere that, in my opinion, sort of ruined it for me. So I've really been enjoying getting back to drawing in graphite. It's kind of like what I was talking about yesterday. I feel like these crowds kind of move interlocked or in step with one another. I think a lot of it has to do with whatever, I wouldn't even call them influencers, but certain people, like I mentioned them yesterday. And again, it's not a knock, it's just kind of a criticism of how easily swayed a lot of people are. Peter McKinnon, for years, has been talking about wanting to learn to draw and how he keeps a daily journal, and he has all of these fountain pens and all that stuff, but never shows what that's being used for. And so far, it seems kind of like what he uses it for is to just have it. He's a stuff guy. He's like always, carrying a bunch of gadgets and extra camera gear and sort of excess all the time. And I feel like that obsession kind of bleeds over into what people are convinced they need. Like everyone thinks they need a pin roll filled with all this stuff. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's become a great secret artist. But I find that, especially with someone like that who's made a career out of sharing his entire life, or I mean his entire creative life, he would have shown quite a bit if he had already done it. Like, it's not a knock, it's just sort of like that's what he does. But I noticed that there's sort of a trend. It's like the same thing as everyone using the same presets as him. Everyone's photos start to look like a Peter McKinnon video, and then he changes and talks about why his old filters were so bad and why he does what he does now. And it's kind of like the ongoing, constant hawking of something. Take my class, buy my filters. Not saying that I'm not also culpable in that, you know. I'm selling prints and I do teach art lessons and all that, but I guess hypocrites can talk. But I don't know, I see that with like a lot of art movements, is that everyone kind of does the same thing. And when everyone started getting really obsessed with fountain pens again, it's around the same time that film started bouncing back really hard. And I noticed it because I noticed the price hike in film in general. And then it's like everybody and their dog had a fountain pen all of a sudden. So stuff that I was using on a daily basis, not that I was early to it, I never stopped using it, you know, I always was into it, but I don't know, it just kind of seems like it's a culture of having stuff. As much as, you know, I like nice things, I like a nice camera, I like nice journal, stuff like that. But it doesn't make you better at your skill. Your skill is what it is, like what I was saying earlier about how some of my favorite drawings I've done on a to-go bag from a local restaurant when I'm traveling, or with a cheap hotel pencil or a cheap hotel pen. But I feel like there's a major emphasis on stuff. It's kind of how I feel about Leica film cameras. I have a $175 film camera that I sent off to get repaired, and it takes great photos. And I'm sure I would notice a difference if I was using an M6 or a, you know, $8,000 lens, maybe. I've seen side-by-sides of the lens that I have and what an M6 with a 35 mil or 50 mil looks like, and it is kind of indecipherable with the same film stock. So it's kind of one of those things where I feel like the chase of the equipment is sort of what a lot of people are after. But I've been shooting film for a long time, documenting bands and stuff like that, and then all of a sudden it got astronomically expensive, and then lo and behold, there's a whole movement of everyone just praising and shooting film, but no one caring about composition or learning all the technical aspects of how to use your camera. In the same way that I started noticing everyone has a sketchbook but isn't bothering to learn how to do anything with it. They just sort of have it to have it, and I feel like it's like the certain popular figures started doing it, and so then everyone had to jump on board. Which, no knock, everyone starts somewhere, but it's the real criticism I have is the stuff. It's like the camera won't make you a great photographer, pen won't make you a great artist. It's the discipline, the time, the patience. Similar to what I was saying yesterday about music equipment. You can buy a $3,000 guitar and still be a bad guitar player. Or you can get, you know, like a Walmart guitar and be a great guitar player, and then people will say, well, that guitar sound you have has character. So it's really like all in the handler, how the performer is doing it. I guess all that to say, it's gain the skill set first, then get obsessed with whatever stuff. I think when it happens the other way around, it's like when people get together to write songs for like songwriters conventions and things like that. It's like, well, Not sure that any great song was written at a meetup for songwriters. Just can't imagine like Simon and Garfunkel had a weekend getaway with someone trying to figure out how to write a good song. I think if you write good songs, you just are attuned to that. Some painters are that way. Some actors are that way. There's been a few musicians over the years that I've played with that when they came and set up and tried out for the bands that I was in, everyone was kind of looking around the room like, wow, he's really serious. He's got a very expensive amp and guitar and flight case with very nice pedals, and then they couldn't decipher the difference of A minor and A major. You know, it's something where, you know, even in that one that I'm talking about specifically, I was the drummer in that band yelling over everyone playing, telling him A minor, A minor. And he just kept nodding and like acting like he was like really doing well, which is odd. I've had that happen a few times with different musicians, but the gear doesn't make you good. It's the time spent. You know, I mean, some people are naturally inclined, but you still gotta play, still gotta draw. You know, the more you work, the luckier you get, whatever the saying is. But I don't mean any of that as a criticism of anyone specifically. I just think of that like in reference to what I was saying about Peter McKinnon. I have a ton of respect for what he's made out of everything. I just, you know, there's an element of selling something in all of those, even if it's just selling the idea of something. I've kind of, I don't know, at a point I was into those because I was constantly upgrading camera gear, video gear, and stuff like that. But after a while I realized all of his videos are just written in a 3-act structure. I mean, he's talked about it, but it's presenting a problem, trying to solve the problem, eventually solving the problem, final product video, join me next week. You know, and then the like and subscribe crowd of, you know, acting like, oh man, I hate to say this, but like and subscribe. I said it once as a joke, like 18 days ago, and felt a shame spiral. But all that to say, I think that also kind of going in line with what I think her name is Lily was saying earlier, asking about the pencils, if they're professional pencils. Some of my best drawings have been with a hotel pencil and a cheap pad, like this one over here. This is Hotel Lucia. It's in Portland. Not a big fan of Portland. Actually, my brother lived there for a long time. I spent a good deal of time there, but that hotel may be one of the best hotels I've ever stayed in. And I got that pencil and then some of their hotel paper, and I drew a bunch of little portraits and stuff, and you know, it's whatever makes you feel inspired. So it shouldn't be a constant chase of needing the best stuff or equipment or expensive anything. Like I said, these Blackwing pencils were gifted to me. Let's see in the comments. Oh, is that like a positive heckle? Or the equivalent to that? I don't think I was talking about anything remotely about that. So what I'm doing here, I haven't mentioned who I'm drawing yet. As I get farther, people are welcome to guess. I already finished the Johnny Depp drawing, and then moving on to this next one. Each one of these I've done just a little bit different in terms of whether I've drawn one whole side of the face or a little bit of both. This one is a little bit more like what I do when I work on commissions. It is where I really am just going to focus on one area for a little while and then build out from there a little bit slower, which may be a little less visually engaging, but it's an honest depiction of what it takes when I draw more of a photoreal portrait. I archive all these videos if anyone wants to go back and watch, if you're curious about different techniques or how I started certain things. And I'm always happy to answer technical questions. I don't really take criticism or any of that. And otherwise, I tend to just ramble. So I'll just talk about whatever I'm thinking about because I don't necessarily want to talk about art while I make art. I always wonder when people comment like that, is that like a drive-by comment? Do they stick around to see if I respond, or is it like a type of like spamming or a bot? And no offense, I just am wondering, it's like, who does it benefit? You know what I mean? Like, are people easily swayed by YouTube chat comments like that? It's so interesting just because at the time of the day that I've been drawing, since I draw at 5 p.m. every day, Pacific Standard Time, California, I tend to catch like, you know, Europe is mostly asleep. East Coast, it's already later there. So it's kind of like my region, Central America, not the continent, but like Central US. I guess they are as well. And then I get a lot of people chatting from different parts of India. So just that's why I'm wondering, it's like such vastly different, not just regions, but beliefs. And in general, with like comments that aren't really relevant to what I'm talking about, or that for the sake of the archive, I don't really read those. If people are wanting to know like certain stuff about technical things, then I'll read out the comment, and or if people just want to talk in general. Like I had a 2-hour conversation with someone the other night about motorcycles because the guy I was drawing rode a motorcycle. So this is a character from one of my favorite movies. One of my favorite characters. I've mentioned him a couple of times in this drawing series. I think so far, in the last, so I've drawn 4 in the series. This will be the first of someone as a character and not just a press photo or something behind the scenes. So it's only slightly different in that sense. This one looks low to me. I'm just going to bring it up. If I need to, I can pull this down. I mentioned this before, so most of my drawings end up being relatively photoreal, or at least a good representation of the reference photo I'm using. But this is in the early sketch phase, so aside from the fact that I added some contour and depth to his nose, a lot of this is just kind of searching around to make sure that I'm getting the right shapes and blocking of everything. So we'll probably be adjusting this. But for a few people that have asked, a lot of the time if you're wanting more of like a photo representation, you want to measure from the bottom of the nose to the corner of the eye, the distance from the bridge of the nose to the corner of the eye, and then on your reference photo from corner to corner of the eye. And those few things, if you just measure out those few things, it usually will give you a more photo accurate result. And this one is just about an inch. And again, he's at an angle, so his eye line is going to be shifted a little bit. But let's see if I got this right. See if I'm in the right ballpark. Measure this part out real quick. I mentioned before, this is kind of the most boring part of the process, both I'm sure for you and me. Yes, close enough. Close enough for jazz, to quote a terrible teacher I had years ago. I'm going to bring this up a bit. We don't need that much contrast yet. I've told this story before to anyone who will listen, but I had a teacher one time that was a terrible musician, but his career was teaching music. And I played guitar in jazz band. Everyone was always slightly out of, like in concert tuning, like slightly off. and I would have to tune to the piano. And I would get halfway through tuning, and he'd say, "Close enough for jazz," because he thought that jazz was all out of key, and that to him equated to out of tune. He's a truly inept music teacher. But yeah, he was I don't know, he was one of those guys who was sort of shocking that he had a career teaching music, because he just always seemed to be wrong. And then I think was later dismissed for some misconduct at that school. Classic Texas teacher story. Yeah, anytime I hear anything kind of like that, sentiment of close enough, it always makes me think of that. Close enough for jazz, like you're playing jazz out of tune. And then that guy was responsible for music education. I'm not sure how far I'll get into this, but for anyone who's watching right now, I draw live every day at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I will be at that time for the next 2 weeks to the day. Or will I say that for the next 13 days? And then as I travel a bit, I will still be going live on a daily basis. Just not sure of the time yet. I think today is, I said it earlier, but don't remember exactly. Today should be day 21 of drawing live at 5 p.m. in a row. Okay, I'll measure that here in a second. When I'm drawing eyes, I'm looking mainly at the space this creates. And again, this is still in the rough sketch phase. So it's as rough as it gets. And then if you want to stick around, you can see me refine this into like a photoreal portrait. If you're too impatient, then at risk of some self-loathing, you can subscribe. I hate saying that, but I post a time lapse of all of these when I'm done with them, so you can see the whole process in about 10 seconds. And then if anyone wants, I can also do a slower time lapse if you want to see it a little bit less rapidly. If you are learning to draw, I'm happy to answer questions. If you have criticism, you can type it up and then delete it. We're to that part of the day where neighbors are going to loudly do dishes. So you may hear a little bit of noise that I can't control. So far, I've found the best cure for that is to talk over it. Otherwise, it kind of takes over the audio feed. All right, and then what I'm going to do, and I mentioned this before, my reference photos on an iPad, and my lights create a really heavy glare, otherwise I would show it to you, but if I point it at the camera, it'll just be glare. I'm going to measure from the corner of this eye to that one to get an idea of the distance, just to maintain and not have to fix as much. So like I said, it's always better to start with a really rough drawing and then fix it, but I mean fix it in terms of depth and texture and shading, not necessarily in terms of form. Now I'm going to measure from corner to corner on this eye individually. Shocking amount of times they are different. Like right now, this one is actually a wider set eye than his other eye. Sometimes it can be their angle in relation to the camera, and most of the time it's just because people's faces are asymmetrical. It's got some pretty heavy contour here, so that'll be blocked out differently. I'm going to go a little bit faster through some of this than I have been, just for the sake of getting a general shape in here. Then I'll slow down and show you a little bit more of the other stuff. But honestly, I'm boring myself talking about art because I'm already making it. So unless you have a specific question, I'm just going to go back to rambling about whatever occurs to me. I'm going to close my window, just spare us a little bit of the neighbor noise. Still can hear some of it. So this is not his eyebrow, that's going to be contour under it, just to be clear. Sometimes I'll block out shapes like that if they're really well defined in the photo. Just going to help gauge distance between things without measuring it. But I can see how that would look like a really disturbingly low eyebrow. I can tell I'm going to bring this down even lower. I can see it already. And this should be just about the same. So that's the noise I was referring to. That's why I don't list these as ASMR. So on any given day, my neighbors wash dishes like they're in a car wreck. All right. No guesses yet, huh? And like I said, this is truly the most boring part of the drawing process. It's just getting it into a shapeable form. I do notice usually when I start a new drawing midway through a live stream that a lot of people drop off, and I think it's a bit of what I said, that it is a little bit boring in this stage. But I think also people don't understand the process of taking these from a rough sketch to like a photoreal drawing. I think a lot of people sort of hope that it wouldn't be such a long process. I mean, me most of all. I spent a lot of time on these. I enjoy a lot of time on these, but the bigger process, bigger portraits take a lot of effort. Block this out real quick, and then we're going to go in and add some contour. I'm not sure how the people in that apartment don't break all their dishes. They slam them so much. They must be made out of something tougher than glass. 'Cause we're upstairs and in a different room. It's still that loud. Maybe this is just a really long ad for unbreakable dishes. Okay, I'll come back and clean up these eyebrows, but mainly just focused on getting some shape in here. Start expanding and filling in detail. But this is, when I'm in this phase of the drawing, especially for the sake of the archive, if people come back and watch these all the way through, if they're looking to learn, this is kind of the biggest exercise in trusting the process, because I know how rough they look when they start, and I know what they look like at the end. And you really just have to lean into it and trust that you're going to finish it. That said, I've done a couple drawings before where I didn't want to finish them because I liked how they look so much at the halfway point. That was mainly when I was still drawing portraits on a grid a long time ago. But I quit doing that because it's too time consuming, and it kind of robs the joy of really nailing a likeness. When you do it on a grid, it's sort of like paint by number a little bit. It could be helpful for learning, but it's not quite the same sensation as drawing just from a portrait reference. I'm gonna get a little better edge on this, and then I'll work on his eyes a little bit. Typically with these portraits, my favorite parts are the eyes, both in drawing them and just kind of the result. I like in some of these where their eyes are not incredibly well lit, how dark you can pull, you know, like different types of texture and contour. It's also interesting looking at these reference photos, just how incredibly different so many people's eyes are. When I first was learning to draw, a lot of the time eyes, the standard was to try to just make like sort of rounded lines like what I'm doing now, which can be helpful, but it doesn't suit everyone's eyes because a lot of people have sort of random patterns and artifacts there, like little arbitrary shapes. But some people's eyes really do just have a series of a lot of rounded lines. It's kind of interesting. Which maybe whoever came up with that technique of drawing, maybe they were doing self-portraits when they figured that out and they had eyes like that, or maybe the subject they were drawing. His eyes are kind of almost just totally smooth with some lining in there. So I don't want to go too far into contrast other than Adding some general rounded shape to it, a little bit of depth. Kind of has like a gray-blue eye, which can read pretty flat when you're just doing monochromatic graphite. I'll go back and blend that a little bit more later. Mainly just wanted to get his eyes in shape here. Should clarify some of the stuff I was talking about earlier. I think I got a little sidetracked. I wasn't knocking Peter McKinnon or those guys who do all that stuff. It's just a thing that I noticed that they set a trend and then everyone starts kind of chasing that, and then it just levels the playing field again when everyone's all chasing the same someone else's dream kind of vibe. I appreciate the kind of effort and discipline that guy has. I've drawn him before, actually. I've got a small portrait of him in my other sketchbook. But I do think that he's like one of the biggest contributors to people being really obsessed with equipment and tools, and not so much like honing the skills and the craft. It's kind of a funny gut punch when he started saying that he was going to just exclusively shoot on film. I feel like I've kind of like reverse like I've been interested in reverse in a lot of things, and he ends up coming around to the same conclusion. So maybe it's just similar taste. Like I used to be obsessed with Jeff Bridges' website because it's filled with the photography that he's shot over all the years that he's been on film productions, and he has a wide lux camera, so there's a lot of really cool stuff he's done. There's one in particular, there's a photo of Martin Landau when they were working on Tucker and his dream car, whatever that Scorsese film is called. It's actually a great film. But wide lux has a lens that moves, and so you can shoot a panoramic photo, but if you move halfway through, you end up with two representations of yourself in the photo. And there's a really incredible black and white wide lux photo that Jeff Bridges took of Martin Landau. Anyway, I was obsessed with that for years. He also doodles a lot, so I've followed his website in particular for, since like 2009, I think. And then all of a sudden I start seeing videos of Peter McKinnon liking that, and now everyone is obsessed with wide lux and Jeff Bridges. It just feels like a little bit of a, I don't know, not even though it's like very public and should be appreciated by a lot of people, it's like something that I feel like I spend a lot of air telling people about, and then it gets thrown into the YouTube getting zeitgeist in that way. So it kind of becomes like a everybody knows about it kind of thing. Sort of like having a favorite show that's like not super popular and then it becomes really popular. It's actually happened to me quite a few times with Peter McKinnon stuff. It seems like Sunday evenings are slow. I noticed that a lot of people drop off just in general for this time, which is all good because this is going in the archive as well. But compared to like the last several nights, I've had a lot of people asking questions and participating a bit more. I think just because I was talking about that stuff, it makes me think of like there was an episode that he put up a while ago that he was really excited because he was taking a photo of Kiefer Sutherland in like his friend's hat. Like I guess like his friend is a hat maker, which I could say a lot about that as well, but I'll refrain. I don't think, after watching that video, I don't think Kiefer Sutherland was very aware that they were intending to do a whole photo shoot. And like the evidence of that is that when he started trying to direct him, he said, just take the photo. And then he talked about it later, like that was kind of like a cool moment, but I read it differently, where it just seemed like Kiefer Sutherland was impatient with them and like wanting to get that moment over with, like he was just wanting a hat and not a photo shoot. Which maybe he was aware of that and he was kind of positioning it like it was a cool moment for the sake of the video. It just kind of felt like one of those don't meet your heroes type moments. But I thought it was also kind of funny. He started talking about his wide lux camera the same one that Jeff Bridges has had for, 40 plus years. And he started trying to explain it to Kiefer Sutherland. He goes, I know, I acted with Jeff Bridges. He had it on set. It's just funny to me. He is literally one of the people that's in those photos. So the idea of explaining it to him is just sort of odd, especially for like a mega fan of his. But maybe, I don't know, maybe he was nervous. I've been in those situations where I've met someone I've had a lot of respect for, and not always as cool as I thought I'd be. And it happens to the best of us. I've talked about this a little bit before, but let's see, is this the Depp drawing from earlier or someone different? It's someone different. Here, I'll show you. So there's the Depp drawing that's basically finished. I was mentioning that he's got so much graphite in his hair that it's got a lot of glaring in it from my photos. But that one's finished, so now I'm on to drawing the next one, which I'm not sure exactly how long I'll be on, but oops. Oops, sorry for the noise. It's that metal ruler clicking around. Oh, thanks. Yeah, the graphite glare is an odd thing. I have, these are Lume cube lights that I use, and they have built-in diffusers. And with my ballpoint drawings and my graphite drawings, they just pick up a lot of glare and reflection. So the only real way around it is to draw at more of an angle, and it tends to hurt my wrists a bit. So just too many years of playing guitar and drums, and sitting at a weird angle for too long is no good. Yeah, the glare it can look cool. I think if it's in the hair, it looks better than if it's like in someone's face. But it's definitely, especially on a smaller drawing, I've drawn him a few times, but I drew Jeff Goldblum last year. And the drawing looks good to the naked eye, but if you look at it under lights, there's so much glare on it because I did like a broad shading of his face. And so I couldn't really ever get a good representation without scanning it. So I think if it's in the hair or maybe like on the fall off parts of the face, it might be a little bit more complimentary. Just gonna leave that there for now. Really just kind of doing initial blocking and adding the majority of the shape to the eyebrows and stuff. It's you said in the hair it looks like hairspray. What's the art glove you're wearing? Yeah, so this is a drawing glove. I actually don't really love wearing it, but it keeps the oil from your hand from getting on the page, and then I can any oil getting in that. Occasionally I'll do like smudging on a drawing with my bare hand, but once you do that, there's no coming back once the oil transfers to the page. So a lot of the time I'll wear this so I'm able to wipe off like little broken graphite and dust and stuff. But it definitely has kind of a, I don't know, single glove weird kind of vibe. It's the golfing glove of the drawing world. You said you feel like the glove can spread it sometimes as well. It depends on the graphite that you're using. So it's these are Blackwing 71s. It's extra firm, but it's actually still kind of in the middle ground of the ones that they make. It's similar to the 602. Yeah, it spreads it less than oil or anything from the side of your hand. Or if you're sitting with your hand in it, you'll get more of a graphite buildup on the edge of your hand than you do on the glove. Pull this eyebrow out a little bit. But yeah, if I'm doing larger portraits like this, I typically wear a drawing glove. When I draw my small book, I don't wear it because my hand usually is resting on something else. I also, when I draw in public, like if I'm at a cafe or anything like that, I tend to be drawing in my smaller sketchbook. And I've worn this drawing a few times, and for whatever reason, people stop and notice and talk more like in, I don't know. There's just like some like slight energy of interest, but also sort of like, what's this guy doing kind of vibe. I don't know, something about wearing a little half glove draws people's attention. So let's see, you said you recently decided drawing your niece on a 4-wheeler for her birthday. It's going to be like a 4-piece of paper. Yeah, I'd say do a little bit every day. Like with that kind of stuff, when I take on a bigger project, I work on a timer. So like I'll give myself like 10 minutes, nothing else on, no music, nothing, and I'll just focus on that. But yeah, if you got 6 weeks, I would try to break it down into segments of like I'm gonna draw 4 times today for 15 minutes at a time and see how you feel about it. But yeah, I bet you can do that. You said you couldn't draw in a cafe personally, too much going on. Yeah, it's I was talking about this earlier. I used to travel for a living with bands, and oddly, because of that, a lot of the time, because of like the sort of chaos that comes along with traveling in vans and buses and like all the sprinters and stuff like that, it feels oddly more peaceful in cafes sometimes. And I think because I just got so accustomed to that, that it's hard for me to sort of zone out and everything else just kind of becomes white noise around me. But yeah, especially like where I live, it really depends on the cafe. And, you know, I'm also, I don't know where you're talking from, but I'm in America. There's like, I'd say, in my experience, a handful of cafes that I've ever experienced here where they're not rushing people to leave to clear the tables. Um, and so there's like a couple places like that in the city where I live, and sometimes I'll draw a lot there. I've done like private lessons at one of them just outside. But they're old school there, so like if they're doing construction on something, they don't care. They just make noise. It's kind of funny. But I get that though. I mean, I draw more at home now, so I have more control over my environment. But sometimes it's nice to just go and like sit and chip away at a drawing. It's also easier with, I have a pocket journal, so it's like a miniature version of what I'm drawing in right now. You said you plan on doing 2 hours a day. Go slow and take my time. It's not due to rushing. Essentially, you're trying to give myself a few days in case I can't do it due to not having time or something else. Yeah. I mean, that's the way to do it. Like, chip away at it. Um, you know, like, I think we were talking the other day, right? Same dude that I was talking to about motorcycles. My memory's not great at this point, and screen names are hard to retain. Yeah, stuff like that. Like I always measure things out, and I'll kind of loosely sketch things. I guess the real, yeah, okay, yeah, I thought that was you. The real thing with that is just having the time to really mess with it and measure things out. And is it going to be in pencil? Did you say? I can't remember if you mentioned what. Oh yeah, you're asking about wrinkles in the skin. I think you also, the other day when you were on, you mentioned that you were eating shrimp Alfredo. I remember thinking about that later because I did not have dinner like that. You said you're doing mixed color, pencils, markers, and spray paint. She likes graffiti art, so it kind of makes sense. Oh, cool. Yeah, I think that'll be. Sounds like you got a lot of time to do it. That'll be cool. I'm pleased with how this one's starting. I was saying this earlier. I don't think anyone was on, so I just kind of was talking for the sake of the archive. But I'm drawing this one a little bit closer to how I would treat a commission. So rather than doing a one fully developed side or showing like a difference in the progress. I'm just kind of building everything out from the nose and eyes a little bit slower. Let's see where the ruler ended up. So you're treating it like when you rebuilt your Firebird, do one single piece at a time. So clean intake, make it nice, then do the block. Nice. What kind of Firebird do you have? It's funny that we were talking about motorcycles the other day. I just got a notification that there's a bunch of motorcycles doing wheelies in Nob Hill, which is a sort of a nicer neighborhood in our area. It just feels like the wrong measurement. I'm gonna keep building and then go down farther from there. So do you have 3 actually on? Oh, okay, you own a car lot. Oh, nice. Yeah, I had in high school. I had a friend that had a Firebird. Yeah, I mean it was a hunk of junk. I mean, I actually had 2 friends that had Firebirds. One of them had a T-top. I mean, these were old. I mean, I'm old, so it's a long time ago. But I remember being jealous of their cars. And then I got like a car that everyone was jealous of for different reasons. It was a 71 Chevy Caprice. It was metallic white with a black vinyl roof. I had a 400 small block. But the band that I was in at the time, we could pack everyone's equipment in my trunk and back seat and still fit like everybody in there. And it had a really good sound system. So it was kind of like the ride that everyone wanted to be in, even though it wasn't exactly a Firebird or cool like that. Yeah, T-tops. It was cool. We popped the T-tops out of his, and but it was funny. There was like wood paneling where stuff had fallen through in the interior of the car. It was in desperate need of repair, and I don't know that he ever fixed it up. But yeah, we all, it was an older generation, but we all had like a pretty big affinity for older cars. So, which is funny thinking about that because at the time my car was probably the equivalent of like the cars that you're talking about that probably seem older to you, because mine was a 71 and this was in the early 2000s that I had it, which I never fully appreciated that. But yeah, I wanted not the Dukes of Hazzard one, but there's a specific 68 Dodge Charger that I really wanted. Has a slightly different tail end and nose. And there was one a few towns over, and it was metallic green with a black vinyl roof. And I'd just never seen one that looked like that. And my dad kind of like strung me along like we were actually going to get it. It was a standard 4-speed. And then he showed me the insurance, and insurance for me at that age to have that car, it was something like $600 a month. It's like a teenager with a Dodge Charger. So I ended up settling for a 71 Chevy Caprice 4-door. But it did have a small block, or a 400 small block, Had a good sound system. This is back when everyone was putting glass packs in their exhaust, because I couldn't afford dual exhaust. But yeah, it was a funny time. I mean, that car also. So I learned to drive in that, and then trucks, because I was in West Texas where I grew up, and I got into a wreck in that car while I was doing my driver's ed, like home driving course, like driving with a parent, and was really upset about it. But then it ended up working out in my favor because they couldn't find replacement parts, so they had to make custom cowlings and stuff. So they took like the hood ornament off, and it was so you said 69 Charger Daytona. Yeah, that's a cool car. But yeah, they ended up custom making all the stuff and taking like the hood ornament off, and they had to Bondo the grill on the car, and it ended up looking like it was a custom job. So if I was driving towards people, my car looked really cool, but if I was next to them, it looked like a granny tank. It was an old lady car. The seats were like couches in that thing. It was great. I've always thought if I ever was in a position to get older cars and tinker with those, that would be one of the first ones I'd look for. Sadly, one of my sister's friends ended up totaling that car after I moved and was like in my career. He, I guess, bought it from my parents for cheap, and then he rolled it and crushed it, which is pretty impressive. It's a 71 Chevy Caprice. I mean, it was, and oddly, all of the stuff we're talking about with cars is relevant to who I'm drawing. No one has yet to guess who it is. All right, so I'm going to draw for a little bit longer. Said my car reminds you of your mom's old S10. I remember the older Chevy S10s. Those were cool back in the day. Nice. Yeah, mailbox smashing. That's kind of like how people entertain themselves where I grew up. We actually had a neighbor. We were out in the country, like out in West Texas, and we're back in that territory. We're chasing everybody out, but that's fine. I'm happy to talk about it. We had a neighbor across the road from us out like on a county road, and people kept smashing his mailbox, and he replaced it a few times, and then it just got dusted. I mean, we also were in like heavy baseball territory, so everyone was, a lot of D1 quality swings in that community. But his mailbox got destroyed a few times. So one day when we were pulling in, he had basically he had welded a steel mailbox together with a giant steel post that he was burying in the ground, and then was building a false wood frame around it, and said that the next time someone took a swing at it, we'd all be able to hear it. And sure enough, he was right. It didn't take even like a full week. Somebody took a swing at that, and you could hear it from everywhere. So it was kind of the recoil of the bat bouncing off of a fully, cemented steel mailbox. It was hilarious. But yeah, that was like the old days before smartphones and all that. So there's a lot more of that kind of entertainment happening. Got to remember his head's at a little bit of a tilt here. So I'm going to draw for about 6.5 more minutes. I'll just get to the 3-hour mark, and then I'll pick back up tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'll be drawing at that time every day for the next 13 days. Oh yeah, yeah. Similar to the story I was talking about. I think a lot of people did that once the mailboxes got trashed a few times. I'm not going to do too much more shaping here because I'm just kind of doing basic preliminary stuff. And then if people want to see this drawing really come together, I'll be back on tomorrow at 5 Pacific Standard Time. And then same with all the drawings that I do. All the originals are for sale if people are interested in that. It's one of one, and then I'll have prints available for people that want them. So this will be I think the 5th one in this series. So far I've drawn Josh Brolin, Joaquin Phoenix, Tom Hardy, Johnny Depp, and then this one will be another one in the series. And then I'm just going to keep doing these for a while. And then in about 13 days, I've got some travel coming up, and I'll be drawing smaller versions of these, so I'll still be doing some streams, probably slightly shorter streams, since I'll be not with like all my lights and everything. But if people are interested in seeing drawing, I will certainly be doing that. And then in some of those places that I'll be, there will actually be some nice ambience. So I might just do some silent drawings like how I used to. Most people are wanting to talk. I don't want to get too far into this one and leave it sort of in a weird spot. So I'm just going to dabble a little bit on some of the contour here. No worries. Thanks for dropping back in. So, like I said, I'll be on every day at 5 for a while. So, nice talking with you. Somebody has allergies. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and call it there for the night. Just shy of 3 hours. Tomorrow I'll be back on at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'll be drawing at that time every day for the next 2 weeks. I'll still be going live while I travel, but just not at the same time. So keep an eye out for that. If people want to guess on this in the comments, it's going to be saved in the archive, or you can just tune in tomorrow and I'll show you who I'm drawing. Thanks for watching.